guiding us, misdirecting us. I had no idea that it would be so difficult to get here, but we are here. I'm very happy that we are. Tonight, it's our great pleasure to have as our speaker Francesco Castellano, a friend for many years, a colleague, most recently Professor, Francesco
That's okay,
Castellano was the head of the Dante Alighieri in Cambridge, and he really renewed the institution. And it is to our great benefit and the loss of the Dante Alighieri that he is no longer the head, because he is here to be with us. He has enough time to be with us now that he's no longer head of Dante Alighieri. And I also wanted to add, because he remains a mystery, you don't have a website, I couldn't call you up, I don't know why, I was away this weekend.
You were away this weekend.
Francesco is a colonel in the Army, a retired colonel in the Army, perhaps a distinction in this group. I don't know if it's going to...
Actually, there's one other person in the audience that is the same thing.
Oh, really? So, welcome, and please sign the form if you haven't and would like to be on the mailing list. And next month we will return to our regular location.
This was just for me then.
This was just for Francesco.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
We have this room one other time, and I will make sure that everyone knows where it is. I knew I should have checked it out, but I didn't. And this is the result, the wild goose chase. So, Francesco.
Thank you, thank you.
Everybody has the text?
Yeah. Well, don't applaud yet. Don't applaud yet. Thank you, Laurie. I guess I deserve this because Laurie's been after me to do one of the canti for quite a while, and I couldn't make up my mind. And so finally she said, I'm doing the 6th, you want to do the 7th? I said, yes, I will. And I said, what is the 7th about? Let me see. But anyway, it's nice to see so many friendly faces, and some of you I also know. And I guess I won't make any more comments about having to come here and needing a guide to get here, but I'll get right into the subject matter, sort of, as an introduction. What I wanted to say was that we all know this. I'm going to say some commonplaces, so please bear with me, forgive me. The popularity of Dante, and there are more translations of Dante than anybody else that I think of, and especially in English, of the Divine Comedy, that is. And also another thing that's become very popular is the Dante readings, such as the one we're having here tonight. In Italy, there's a particular gentleman, his name is Vittorio Sermonti, who is a writer, translator, actor, professor, who's been quite famous in this type of event and venue. He gave he started about 15 years ago, but the most popular one was about 3 years ago. If I'm speaking too fast, I tend to do that, because I'm Italian. Other than that, I just speak fast. I have too many words coming out of my mouth at once. They did it at the Santa Maria delle Grazie in Milano. That's where the Last Supper is. You all know, how many of you have seen that? There's not a test here. Well, so that place is not, it's pretty big. It's good, not big, but it used to be, it was a cafeteria for the monks is what it was. So, and they held it there. Well, after the first one, so many people showed up that they couldn't fit any more people in there. And they had fit people outside in the street. And they put speakers all over the street close to that Santa Maria delle Grazie. They did the Inferno, and at the end of all the canti, they figured that something like over 65,000 people showed up to listen to this guy, to listen to Dante, let's say it, not Vittorio Sermonti necessarily. And then he also did it at the Cenacolo in Santa Croce in Florence, and 25 people over a period of time showed up. So now you can go to websites and you can actually buy these commenti of Sermonti. It was quite interesting. More recently, I talked about translations. There's a more recent translation done by these two gentlemen called, you may already know this, but someone told me a while ago, I saw an ad, not an ad, I saw an ad, but also saw a review in the Phoenix. And the review of the Phoenix started with, Dear Vinny, because I don't know, they're trying to update Dante. They always have to do this to Italians, that gets me very angry. But anyway, the names of the two people are Sando Burke and Marcus Sanders. Try to say that 3 times. Sando Burke is also a writer. He's done a lot of the plates. Are you familiar? Some of you have seen this. If you buy the full size, it's like $3,000. I just saw it today at the Coop, MIT Coop, because I work near there, for $22.95 each. So if you want to buy that, and I'll give you samples of the translation in a moment, just as so if you're interested in buying it or not. And here's a sample, for example, since we're doing Canto 7 here. The very beginning, when Dante writes that after hugging a few times, and they finally got going, And this is what the translation that they come. It's a translation, but more like an adaptation. He says, after the two of them had hugged and backslapped and shook hands enough times, Sordello finally stepped back and had a look at us, smiling, and said, "Now then, who are you guys?" That's one. And the other one, when Sordello makes a line, I say line in the sand, in the dirt, he says, "Check this out." That's the kind of stuff they have there. And also, when among the princes, he also puts new people in. Like, for example, he has Oprah and Elvis among the gluttonous. And but this one is in the valley that we're going to be speaking about tonight, La Valletta Fiorita, the Flowery Valley. I'll just quote. He says, "And the skinny dude in the corner is Gray Davis, who forgot to balance California's books." So anyway, this is just but the one that really got me was the beginning of Canto 8, which I'm not going to do tonight. Somebody else will, but it's one of the most beautiful lines in Dante. For those of you who understand Italian, I have to say it in Italian. I can do it in English as well, but it says, the Italian is so beautiful. He talks about I'll say it in English first. "It was the hour that brings longing again to melt the hearts of those out on the sea, and the day they have said goodbye to their dear friends." And in Italian it's, "Era già l'ora che volge il disio ai naviganti e intenerisce il core. Lo dican detto ai dolci amici addio." Now, that's wonderful. Here's the translation from this book. Okay, ready for this? "It was the time when the trucker thinks of all the roads that lead back home and his girlfriend is waiting with a beer." Well, enough of that. So my point in all this is that everybody's making money out of Dante, and I won't be, this is not a comedy routine, please, but allow me this anyway. Some of you may remember, I think it was in the 40s, where there was an ASCAP strike, and so they couldn't use the songs that had already been written, so they were using melodies from famous composers of the Romantic period where they could get nice melodies. And the one composer that was most plundered was Tchaikovsky, that eventually it led one wag to compose a song called "Everybody's Making Money" by Tchaikovsky, and you know what this is leading to? Everybody's making money but poor Dante. So anyway, so yes. Speak up? I will. Okay, all right, I will. Thank you. I'll have to project, okay. As I said before, Laurie said, Professor Shepard said, "You do Canto 7, and I said, "Sure." Then I found out what it was. I didn't remember which one it was, obviously. She said, "The one with the princess." Oh, okay, I got it. But Vittorio Sermonti said that the fellow I mentioned, he said that the first 5 canti of the Purgatorio are probably the most striking and the most powerful sequence of the Divine Comedy. You can argue about that. But I get to do 7, not one of the first 5. So, but here we go. There's a particular connection. I mean, obviously, to say I love Dante. Oh, really, you do? I really do. And also, there's a connection that I've had as a child. I was born in a town in Abruzzi called Sulmona, which is the place where Ovid was born, by the way. As a result, we had to translate the Tristia when I was in the 6th grade. But that's another story. But the name of the city comes from, again, legend, just like as the fact as you find in the Aeneid, is named after a person named Solimon, who was either a close friend of Aeneas, or he was a son-in-law. So we're related to the Aeneid somehow in there, And also, another connection with the Abruzzi that I have with this canto, Sordello, when he came back to Italy after being in Provence and with Charles of Anjou, he gave him castles in Abruzzi, a lot of castles in the Abruzzi. So there's another connection there as well, you see. And, well, this canto is the canto that is a continuation of number 6. In the canto 6, if you noticed, everything is going along fine until Dante does one of his famous digressions that he starts with, "O serva Italia di dolore ostello, non donna di provincia ma bordello," and he goes off and about complaining about Italy. And then all of a sudden, the beginning of 7, he just takes off from line 75 or 76 from the previous canto, and he starts, oh, and by the way, after they got through embracing each other, this is what happened. And this is, at this point, in the last canto, we saw Dante being accosted by a lot of people, surrounded by a lot of people, and nobody heard of Virgil was just on the side somewhere. In fact, Dante brings up the image of he was like someone who had won at dice or won a lot of money, so all his friends are after him, and Virgil is sort of on the side in a sense. Here, it's really Virgil that really is talking to Sordello for a good part of the canto, up to line 64 or so, and Dante is not even mentioned. In fact, after they meet and he says, okay, fine, and they embrace, they say, who are you? In some translation, they say, who are you, one person. Some people, actually, as in this particular translation we'll be using tonight, by the way, I I like this one. It's the poet A.S. Merwin. And he actually says, who are both of you? Are you both? Which is important because Virgil doesn't say, oh, this is Dante and this is me, I'm here and I'm here because of him. He doesn't even mention him at all. He just says, I'm Virgil, you know. And once he says that, Sordello, who's also from Mantua, they already met in Canto 6, you know, they've been paesani, if you will. He says, Virgil, oh my God. He says, I can't believe it. And Dante explains it as if, he says, it's like, is it or isn't? And he says, I can't believe my eyes. And it is Virgil. And at this point, he knows Virgil not just as somebody from Mantua, but someone who has written this great book, the Aeneid, which was an influence through all the ages and Middle Ages and all of European literature, of course. And he embraces him. And Dante says something is one who is of lower station embraces. And there are a lot of things in Dante that, you know, scholars love to write about. This is one of them. Where did he embrace Virgil? Who cares? But anyway, they do. And they say, was it at the knees? No. People say, no, it was just below the armpits. No, well, maybe it's even lower the feet. The point is that you can imagine that since Virgil, he thinks of Virgil as being such a high personage and a great poet, that he's not going to embrace him. Maybe he will grab him at the knees or somewhere else and on the lower part of his body. And he goes into this great, compliment. He says, O gloria de Latino, glory of the Latins, because he was the great poet, the greatest poet of Latin literature. Although I think Ovid was better, but that's my own thing. Actually, of course, a lot has been written about Virgil and the Aeneid and Dante, but also Ovid has quite a strong influence, and not so much because of metamorphosis, but also the style of writing. So right away, then Sordello also asks him. He says, "Well, where are you from? Where part of hell are you from?" Now, when you first read this, you say, "How does he know he came from hell?" Well, you have to go back in the earlier line where Virgil says that he didn't. And I'll read the exact line. He says, "He said, I come from the time that of Octavian, where before faith, I had faith. So as a result, if he didn't have faith, he couldn't be in purgatory and be among the people that will be saved. So as a result." He asks him right away. Sordello is a very quick guy, thinks quick on his feet, and he says, "Yeah, where are you from in hell?" And he tells him, he says, "Well, I'm not really from one of those cloisters. I'm really from limbo," which is really not so bad. We're not really suffering there, although we can talk, we sort of lament, but I'm with those children who were never baptized, and so it's really pretty good. In fact, some people have even go far to say that Dante presents this in such a way that some people have imagined it or interpreted it as that maybe there's a chance, perchance, possibly, that Virgil might be saved. Well, he was still in purgatory, so I really don't think. I mean, he was still in hell, so I really don't think so. But people have written a lot about that as well. And he says, "What are you doing here?" He says, again, he doesn't say, "I came here because of Dante, because, I'm his guide." He says, "No, because some power from heaven moved me to do this." And this happens in a few times in the comedy as well. Dante will answer that at times. Sometimes he'll say about Beatrice. And he said, why are you there? First of all, why are you there? He says, "Well, it wasn't because I did something," because he's with those children that were not baptized. It was not a sin of commission, but more a sin of omission. Then all of a sudden, it seems that it's sort of funny. Sometimes I see things in a funny way, you might imagine. And they're having all this great discussion, and they ask about different things, and Virgil sort of stops at one point. He says, "Look, enough of the chatter. I want to I have to get out of here. I have to go somewhere." And he says, "Tell us if you can, any way we can make I'll read the English translation here, line 37. "But tell us if you know and can of any way that we can take to come more quickly to the true beginning of purgatory." Remember, they're not in purgatory yet. Dante invented it as himself. It's line 37, 37, 38, 39, that tercina. And he says, "So how do we get there?" And almost reminds me of, remember Groucho Marx used to say, "I'd love to be going talking to you, but it's time to play You Bet Your Life," kind of thing. Let me go on here. And Sordello answers, he says, "We are no assigned specific place here. We're just in the general area here, and if you want, I'll guide you." And he says, in this particular case, I should mention that a lot of it has been written, and I went back and checked the Aeneid. The Canto 6 of the Aeneid is the canto where Aeneas goes down to Hades to see his father, because he's seen his father, and he sees in a vision, and he has to go visit him. And he goes through so many guides and so many problems. First he sees the Sibyl, this woman near Naples, And then he finally goes down there, and she tells him all the problems he has to go through, Cerberus, and so on and so forth. And then when he gets down there, he meets a poet, sort of a legendary poet, Musaeus, who says the same line, actually, that Sordello uses here. I'm in no fixed place here. We can move around. People, they're not like all in one place. It seems like in Purgatory, the whole idea, by the way, is that people are not suffering there. We think of Purgatory. People say, oh, he's in Purgatory. Actually, Purgatory, almost at one point, actually says it was not that it was fun. It's not because they haven't seen the divine light, but it's not unpleasant. They're doing things. There's a kind of humanity, there's a kind of peacefulness, as we'll see later in the Valley of the Princes here, and so they can move around wherever they want, except they can go back down, you know. Although we did this last week was 101, now we came down here in 026. And in fact, he says, there are souls off on the right over there. If you allow me, I will lead you to them, and then they will be known to you, and not without great pleasure. And he says, how is that? He says, well, he said, if someone wanted to go up at night, would anyone prevent him, or would he not be able to? Because they want to keep on going. They said, we can't stay around here anymore. They want to keep on going and go right to Purgatory. He says, no, you can't do this at night. He says, well, what's the reason? Is there some impediment or some person? He says, no. And this is where he draws this line in the ground saying, even if you wanted to, you can't, because your willpower will not let you. And again, it's the idea of night, the darkness and the evil and sin, and not having the power to move on without light, the light of heaven that eventually comes to these people. And this he explains, called the law of Purgatory, where you can go only travel during the day and not at night. And we are at night here. Sometime in the afternoon, we'll see late afternoon, early evening, depending on the time of year this was, and this is around springtime here. And the way we find this out is that they're singing, when we go there, he takes them to the Valley of Princes, they're singing Salve Regina. I'll get to that in a moment. So, he says, you could go, I'll have some people I will show you'll find interesting, but in the meantime, we can't go among them. It's easier if we stand right here on the side, and we can see right from here who they are. And they say, what are they talking about? Well, they finally move along, and they find that actually there's like a little valley on the side of the mountain. And this, again, is similar to the Canto 6 of the Aeneid, where Anchises, after they get this first guide for a bit of a time of this Musaeus, Anchises, Aeneas' father, says, I will show you some of these good princes that are here, the virtuous princes that are here in the Elysian fields. And he also is almost line by line what Dante says here and what the Aeneid does say, standing on a sort of a little rise and looking over this valley. This one is the description, there's a short section here of description of from 64 to about 90, 94, 90, actually 97, almost 94. There's a description of this valley. And there are a few other things that are here that scholars have quibbled over and argued over about some of the words that are in here, and I'll get to that in a moment. But Dante seems, I personally almost feel like what you said about the apostrophe, the Serva Italia. I mean, he could have been a little more poetic here, but he wasn't, it seems to me. He's trying to explain that, as in the Elysian field, not only are there so many beautiful colors from the flowers and the green of the grasses in this valley, but also there are scents never felt before. And the expression that they have here, he starts explaining by comparing. He says gold, silver, and white and reds and different kinds of, nothing could compare to the colors that you saw here. And I will go to that particular line. It's line 73. The Italian has oro, argento fine, cocco e biacca. I say cocco to explain that this is the only guy that uses this word. Merwin is the only one that uses this word here. Usually they say red, or they say, and I think in the Holland he says carmine, meaning red, carmine. Gold and fine silver. Is that Coach Neil or Cook Neil? I don't even know how to pronounce that. Somebody may suggest it to me. White lead. Or the wood indigo with its lucid sheen, fresh emerald at the moment it breaks up. I mean, I think Giambattista Marino would have done a lot better, don't you think? Marino is a fellow a writer from the Baroque period who wrote these Marinismi, these great conceits of explanations of anything, that he would go beyond any kind of anybody's imagination. And The part that is really not clear to a lot of people is the line that says wood indigo with its lucid sheen. And the Italian is indaco. And some people say it's indigo, meaning, like indigo, the blue, the azure color. And it goes back to centuries. People thought it was another word. It was an Indian wood, not indaco, but indico, meaning that it was an Indian wood that possibly might have been something dark, and then if it's shiny, then it hasn't been resolved. One of the reasons they say that, for example, some write it differently. They say indaco, no comma there, or wood indigo, no comma. Well, in English, you see, you can't go. The English is freer, but the Italian, if you look across there, 73, indaco, legno lucido, sereno. Some put the comma after lucido. They don't use the e. And ultimately, is it wood or is it the indigo, the color? I mean, it's like 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Some people say, well, it's got to be indigo one, and then this bright or shiny wood that looks so bright in color, because you have these opposition, oro, argento, gold, and fine silver, red and white, and so now they have this blue, and this, well, I think it shouldn't be there. I think it should be just one thing. Whatever this is, whether it's a blue wood or a wood that is shiny, is juxtaposed to the fresh, the next line, a fresh emerald at the moment it breaks up. So you cut this emerald and this bright, wonderful, dark, deep green. But that's one thing that has been written over and over again, and so if you want to do a little history, a little article, write your own version of that, and people say, gee, that's interesting. But the Soul Valley, as I said, is taken right out of the Aeneid 6, in this Valley of the Princes that Anchises shows his son Aeneas. And here, Sordello is showing them around. He's being the guide. And what are these princes doing? These princes were not people. They were nice people in real life, but now they're singing the Salve Regina. And the Salve Regina, of course, is the Queen, the Madonna, the Mary. And Mary had always been the person to go to, especially from the medieval ages on, for any kind of help. And in the Catholic religion, especially the Italian Catholic religion, which is really quite a pagan religion, that's my own interpretation, there are saints for everything, just as there are gods for everything. So, and of all these, at the very top of this hierarchy is the Virgin Mary. And she is in fact, even in the prayer, Salve Regina, it says, ergo advocata nostra, therefore our advocate, Mary, speaking for us to help us. And the Salve Regina is a prayer that's really recited at night and at the Vespers, one of the last prayers of a rite called the Compline. People don't do that anymore. And so that's why Dante thought it would be a good idea to place it here, because it's evening and they're doing the Salve Regina. Another one, it seems like an easy association, although I don't see that there's quite a dichotomy between these princes and this wonderful valley singing together and happy in this beautiful, verdant and colorful and scented valley. But the prayer, Salve Regina, says about us, the people, humanity, being in this valley of tears. You're familiar with that. And so they're in the valley, but it doesn't look like it's a valley of tears. Maybe you just want people to remind themselves that the earth is a valley of tears, but here the valley of tears turned into this wonderful valley that is the way to salvation. And some even suggested that this valley, the vision of this valley, is a sort of a preview, if you will, of the terrestrial paradise, paradise on earth at the top of Mount Purgatory. You can go on and on about all of these things, but in any case, so once that Sordello shows them what the princes there, what they're doing, and describes the whole location and what it is like. Then he says, well, let me show you from up here. See that guy, he points out only the certain people. And which people does he show? Well, Dante, I mean, is incredible. You get into his mind, it's like a labyrinth, but he keeps it all straight. It's just incredible. Being influenced by whether it be the Aeneid and other poets of Roman poets, and the Provençal poets. Well, in the Canto 6, Professor Shepard made a point of that Dante talks about the Italy, Serva Italia, and all these people that are mentioned, and which is similar to what Sordello had written, a famous lament or plagne to his patron, this Provençal patron of the arts called Blacas. And he had died, and he was inviting all the princes of Europe to eat his heart. Now, this is not eat his heart out, literally, but to say, take some of his vigor, some of his humanity, and be more like him. Well, now that he's pointing out these princes, they are the same princes, pretty much, as that he mentioned in his own poem. This is Sordello, not in the Divine Comedy. And almost all of them are there, except for one, and I believe it's the Italian Guglielmo the VII of Monferrato, and some are descendants of those princes. And so all of this is really that sort of medieval mind of Dante. Everything sort of fits in very well. He puts all this together, and it works okay. And another thing that he does is that in several of the cases, he puts princes together, and in some cases they're actually singing together, harmonizing with the Salve Regina, what other hymns there are, where now they're together and they're singing together, whereas in the past, in their real life that is, they were enemies, whether it be in battle or political enemies. So to show that everything that happened in life is all gone, all vanitas vanitatum, vanity of vanities. Here it's humanity and love and peace and harmony that counts. And he goes through the list of all the various princes, which I will go very quickly because we could spend a lot of time on each one of these. He puts Rudolf I of Habsburg together with Ottokar, king of Bohemia. And why? Well, Habsburg was nominated, he was elected, chosen as emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, but he was also king of Germany, and he was supposed to come to Italy, according to Dante, and fix all the problems, but he never did. He was too busy fighting to aggrandize himself, his glory, and his kingdom, and Ottokar was doing the same thing. He was fighting him, and they never, and Dante always goes back, there's an expression in Italian, la lingua batte dove il dente duole, which means literally, let's say, there's no word for that, no expression for this in English. Is there? Can you think of? But basically, the tongue always goes where the tooth hurts. Well, with Dante, la lingua batte, though, that is dente duole. He always goes back, no matter what. He's got to go to some political diatribe one way or another, and it's always about Italy. And my own opinion of Dante in this case is that he's the first of all the Italians that came to be until today that always look help from the outside and never from within. They always, if something is not Italian, it's got to be better. And the Italians in modern, I'm sort of digressing here, but that the Italians have a word for themselves. They call it esterophili, which means loving anything that is foreign. Estero means abroad, So, and I think Dante is one of those for some reason, but I guess he's doing it more from the point of view of the Holy Roman Empire. He has a larger vision than I do, obviously. But nonetheless, he always goes back to what these people could have done for Italy. In fact, all of these people that he mentions, except for one, which is the King of England, they all have to do with the Holy Roman Empire and how they would have affected somehow the Italian fate in politics in Italy, as you'll see. So he puts these two people together. And he starts with the king, with the way he also uses some sort of a hierarchy. He starts with the king of Rudolf I of Habsburg, and goes all the way down to the very end. And he puts at the very end an Italian guy from Monferrato. So the next two people that he puts together are King Philip of France III and King Henry of Navarre. He's the very first Henry of Navarre. And although Philip of France was fighting with a lot of people, he was also fighting for Pedro III of Aragon. But these were the two that were really he puts together because Philip III was the father of the plague of everything. He calls it mal di Francia, France. But Dante just hated Philip IV because he created all the problems in Italy associated with Boniface VIII, and I won't go into the whole story. I'll just say that for somebody that knows what it's about. And he hates him, and Dante hates him so much, so whenever he brings him up, he never mentions him by name. He always mentions, the guy that did this, so people that were reading this, they went, oh yeah, of course, he means Philip IV, who was known as Filippo il Bello, Le Beau in French, and Philip the Fair. And he was also Henry of Navarre's son-in-law. So they're related. So they also, like, he feels angry at them. He puts them together because they both sort of aided this fellow was the mal di Francia. The other two people that he mentions are Pedro III of Aragon, who was known as the Great, by the way, and Charles I of Anjou. And they also fought against each other over Sicily. It's related there. And they wanted, eventually, this is the time that Sicily was still under the French. Eventually, the Sicilian Vespers, for those of you that know opera, there's one person at least I know knows opera here. The Vespri Siciliani in 1282. Eventually, the Aragonese sort of helped move things along, and eventually they lost Sicily. And there's a line in this, which I don't like the way it's written because it gives you the wrong impression. It says that Philip III says, so kind died in flight, deflowering the lily. It doesn't mean really intended disfiorando. What it means is that because of him, all the problems that he had, France lost a lot of the land, including Sicily. And so it's like taking out one petal at a time, you see. And so they lost That's what he did. You see, he lost. He did more harm than good with all his battles. And that's what these people did. They were always fighting battles, but they never gained anything. And although, while I said that, he also, Dante makes a point that, and Sordello, they're talking to each other. They're saying that by the way, this is all in the mouth of Sordello, by the way, because he did that. He was castigating all the princes of Europe in his famous poem. Now he's doing the same thing for Dante. Dante uses him as sort of a model for what he wanted to say, but he has Sordello say it. Now, what was I going to say? I was going to say something else, but I escaped my mind about something else. Pedro, the king of Aragon, also had been helped in getting the French out by the Swabians, and that's the connection also. Manfred is also in Purgatorio, and when Dante meets him, he just says a beautiful blonde person, wonderful. He's very nice because he was the son of Frederick II, and he was obviously an emperor, and Dante wanted him to unify, would have liked him to have unified Italy. So he still feels very close to Manfred, and he describes him very nicely. He doesn't put him on the value of the princes, the negligent princes. And these they were from the house of Hohenstaufen, and they helped the Aragonese throw the French out. Charles of Anjou, what he did, he actually killed Manfred in the famous Battle of Benevento in 1266. And then later, of course, he had been called by Clement IV in Italy to solve his own problems. And then later in 1268, the next on line was Conradin IV, and in Italian, it's always a big deal in Italian history when you read this, when you study this as a child, Corradino. He sounds like a nice little kid, you know, although he was, I think, 16 or something. But he was a foe of Manfred just the same anyway. But he actually put the French in flight. But then at the Battle of Tagliacozzo, a town near where I come from, anybody who knows me, there's always a town near where I come from, something famous happened. But Tagliacozzo was a nice little town. I went up in the mountains between Rome and Sulmona, and that's where Corradino was eventually caught because he was betrayed by one of the Italian guys, you know, Charles Anjou said, look, if you tell me where the guy is, I'll give you this. And he said, okay, fine. And eventually they took this poor Conradin and took him to Naples and cut his head off. So Dante is remembering on this, and so that's why he put Charles of Anjou there. But at the same time, he's not all that mean to him, really. I mean, he's not at all. I don't know if I should mention this, but since he's talking about Pedro III, he says, and the Giovanetto, he says, the young man, that's in the line, let's see. Yeah, 115, and the young man sitting there behind him. I think this one, most people have accepted it's Pedro, his younger son, who died, who never served, who never became king. A lot of people, a lot of books, especially if you find old English translations, they'll say Pedro III, Alphonse III, who was his son, but really is not at this point. It makes no sense because the way it says here that he never got a chance to rule, so it couldn't have been Alphonse III, so it's Pedro. Some of you are taking notes on this, and I'm glad because there'll be a quiz on it, so you know who was the young man. But then he goes on to finally, two other people. They're not really together. They're together, but they're not singing together or doing anything. They're just, one is Henry III, King of England, and the other one is William VII, the Marquis of Monferrato, now the Italian guy. Henry III was the son of John Lackland or Jean Santerre, and for those of you that have seen movies or know about Robin Hood, he's the guy that signed the Magna Carta, or Magna Carta, the way I say it, and he eventually Henry III was not really he was not even as mean as his father. He was just feckless. However, while all along here, Dante's been saying, you know, all these people at least had some sort of manliness about them. Their sons, he says, la pianta il seme, the plant and the seed. The seed was never as great as the plant at all, as the tree. In this case, actually, he says quite the opposite, which is true, because Edward I, the son of Henry III, following all this, actually became quite effective, and he finally conquered Wales. That's effective, and he made it part of England. He tried with Scotland. He didn't succeed, but he brought new laws. In fact, he's known as, I have to say this, the English Justinian. You like that, right? The English Justinian, okay. And William VII, Marquis of Monferrato, Dante puts him here because he created more problems for himself and also for his progeny. He had been an ally, a secret, I don't know if secret, but a secret ally of Charles of Anjou, had come into Italy, and he had gone as far as conquering Milan. At this point, he he rose the wrath of the Savoy and the Visconti. They didn't like that, so they fought against him, so he had to defend himself. So he went into Alessandria, one of the cities in his own, Monferrato. Didn't go there for Asti Spumante or anything. He decided to raise up an army, and when they got him, they put him in jail, then they put him in a cage, and about a year and a half later, the poor guy died. And that was the end of him. And at the end, we have this Italian, and I see that Dante again, he puts him at the very end, the Italian. He's like, he's the lowest of the low, I have to feel that. I think I've covered more than enough that I wanted to cover. I could have gone a little more detail, but I think that's probably that's probably it. Ultimately, if I had to say one thing about this canto, is that you do get a feeling that everybody's at peace. All that stuff that happened in real life, all the wars and all the bickering and all the political infights are all for naught, which is really, it's actually one of my favorite lines. I mentioned before, vanitas vanitatum from Ecclesiastes, that everything just, after you die, it's all over, and all of that is like, the one with most toys wins kind of thing. So it's a kind of very touching, actually, and hopeful kind of canto. So at this point, I guess what we're supposed to do, we read the part in Italian, right? Okay, let me have some water. I did want to mention one thing before the other canti, there are some beautiful lines, especially in Purgatorio as you go on. In fact, it's become, I think the Purgatorio is my favorite cantica, probably. Not that the Paradiso is not beautiful, but there are some beautiful, beautiful lines. The only one that really gets me here that I like, although it's not a pretty image, but I like it because of the sound, it's on line 31 to 33, that terzina there, that tercet there, 31, 33. The English, so you'll know, the English just doesn't do it. I mean, it just can't, because it's very hard to maintain that alliteration. In English, says, "There stay I with infant." That's when Virgil explains where was he from. He said, "I was in limbo with those innocents," so it wasn't really so bad. "There I stay with the infant innocents whom the fangs of death fastened upon, before they were exempted from human sin." Well, it's not Dante, but in Italian, here's how it goes. And it's the second line that I really like. It gives it quite an image. "Qui vi sto io coi pargoli innocenti." That's already beautiful. And then, "Dai denti morsi della morte avante." Dai denti morsi della morte avante, che forser dall'umana colpa essenti. It's probably the nicest tercet in the whole thing for me. But so I thought I mentioned that out before, so when you get to it, you'll hear it and you'll know. So here we go. Poscia che l'accoglienze oneste e liete furo iterate 3 o 4 volte, Sordel si trasse e disse: "Voi chi siete? Anzi che a questo monte fosser volte l'anime degne di salire a Dio, fur l'ossa mie per Ottavian sepolte, io son Virgilio, e per null'altro rio lo ciel perdei che per non aver fe." Così rispose allora il duca mio: "Qual è colui che cosa innanzi sé subita vede onde si meraviglia, che crede non dicendo ella è, non è? Tal parve quelli. E poi chinò le ciglia e umilmente ritornò ver lui, e abbracciò l'ave il minor s'appiglia. O gloria di Latin, disse, per cui mostrò ciò che potea la lingua nostra, o pregio eterno del loco ond'io fui. Qual merito o qual grazia mi ti mostra? S'io son d'udir le tue parole degno, dimmi se vien d'inferno e di qual chiostra. Per tutti i cerchi del dolento regno, rispose lui, son io di qua venuto, virtù del ciel mi mosse, e con lei vegno. Non per far, ma per non fare ho perduto a veder l'alto sol che tu disiri, e che fu tardi per me conosciuto. Luogo è là giù non tristo di martiri, ma di tenebre solo, ove i lamenti non suonan come guai, ma son sospiri. Qui vi sto io coi pargoli innocenti, dai denti morsi della morte avante, che fosser dall'umana colpa essenti. Qui vi sto io con quei che le 3 sante virtù non si vestiro, e senza vizio conobber l'altre seguir tutte quante. Ma se tu sai e puoi, alcun indizio da noi perché venir possiam piuttosto là dove Purgatorio ha dritto inizio? Rispose, loco certo non c'è posto, dicitome andar suso e intorno, per quantir posso a guida mi t'accosto, ma vedi già come di chi nel giorno, e andar su di notte non si puote, però è buon pensar di bel soggiorno. Anime sono a destra qua remote, se mi consenti io ti merrò ad esse. e non senza diletto ti fier note. Come ciò fu risposto? Chi volesse salir di notte, fora egli impedito d'altrui, e non saria che non potesse? E il buon sordello in terra fregò il dito, dicendo: vedi, questa sola riga non varcheresti dopo il sol partito. Non però ch'altra cosa desse briga, che la notturna tenebra a dir suso, quella col non poder la voglia intriga. Ben si poria con lei tornare in giuso a passeggiar la costa intorno errando, mentre che l'orizzonte il dì tien chiuso. Allora mio signor, quasi ammirando: mena, ne disse, dunque là, vedici che aver si può diletto dimorando. Poco allungati c'eravam di lici, quando io m'accorsi che il monte era scemo, a guisa che i vallon li sceman quici. Colà, disse quell'ombra, n'anderemo dove la costa face di Segrembo, e là il nuovo giorno attenderemo. Tra erto e piano era un sentiero sghembo, che ne condusse in fianco della lacca, là dove più che a mezzo muore il lembo. Oro e argento fine, cocco e biacca, indaco, legno lucido e sereno, fresco smeraldo in l'ora che si fiacca, dall'erba e dagli fior dentro a quel seno posti, ciascun saria di color vinto, come dal suo maggior è vinto il meno. Non avea pur natura ivi dipinto, ma di suavità mille odori vi facea un incognito e distinto. Salve regina, in sul verde e in su fiori, quindi seder cantando, anime vidi che per la valle non parean di fuori. Prima che il poco sole ormai s'annidi, cominciò il mantoan che ci avea volti, tra color non vogliate che io vi guidi. Di questo balzo meglio li atti e volti conoscerete voi di tutti quanti, che nella lama giù tra essi accolti. Colui che più siede alto e fa sembianti d'aver negletto ciò che far dovea, e che non muove bocca agli altrui canti, Rodolfo imperador fu, che potea sanar le piaghe c'hanno l'Italia morta, e che tardi per altri si ricrea. L'altro, che nella vista lui conforta, resse la terra dove l'acqua nasce, che monta in albia in mar ne porta. Ottacchero ebbe nome, e nelle fasce fu meglio assai che vincis là suo figlio barbuto, con lussuria e ozio pasce. E quel nasetto che stretto a consiglio par con colui che a benigno aspetto morì fuggendo e disfiorando il giglio. Guardate là come si batte il petto. L'altro vedete che ha fatto alla guancia della sua palma sospirando letto. Padre e suocero son del mal di Francia, sanno la vita, la sua viziata e lorda, e quindi viene il duol che si li lancia. Quel che parsi membruto e che s'accorda cantando, con colui dal maschio naso d'ogni valor portò cinta la corda, e se il re dopo lui fosse rimaso lo giovanetto che retro a lui risiede, ben andava il valor di vaso in vaso, che non si può dir dell'altre erede. Jacomo e Federico hanno i reami, del retaggio miglior nessun possiede. Rade volte risurge per i rami l'umana probitate, e questo vole che qui la dà perché da lui si chiami. Anche al nasuto vanno mie parole, non menca d'altro. Pier con lui canta, onde Puglia e Provenza già si dole. Tant'è del seme suo minor la pianta, quanto, più che Beatrice e Margherita, costanza di marito ancor si vanta. Vedete il re della semplice vita sederla solo a rigo d'Inghilterra? Questi ne rami suoi migliori uscita. Quel che più basso tra costor s'atterra, guardando in suso, è Guglielmo Marchese, per cui Alessandria e la sua guerra fa pianger Monferrato e Canavese. Thank you. Thank you, you're very kind. Any questions? Yes?
One place I heard it now from your presentation, there was in the Valley of Tears, in the valley. And I'm wondering if I'm suggesting this as a possibility. This is anti-purgatorio, that's where the penance is. Purgation comes in purgatorio once they go through the gate. Therefore, the time that these people have to spend before moving upward could be a simile for the valley.
Oh, clearly, I agree. I'm just saying just the juxtaposition is where they're actually located in this wonderful valley, but yet the Valley of Tears, right? Yes, oh, sure, yes, yeah. Yes.
Mi sembra che Sordello sia lombardo di origine.
Sordello, sì.
Lombardo, vicino a Mantova.
Sì, Goito, era nato a Goito.
Come mai lui è diventato un provenzale?
Ah. Okay, the question is that since Sordello really is from Lombardy, he's from Mantova, actually little town Goito, how come he was Provenzale? Well, there are other people who are more qualified to answer that question, but I will answer it. I'll make something up. No. The reason is that at this time, really the great poetry was really the Provençal poetry, and we say Provençal poetry, but it wasn't just the Provence. It was sort of like a, can we call it an isogloss maybe in poetry maybe, that goes all the way from Provençal, where they speak Occitan, it's a different language, all the way across to Genova and the Liguria, and all the way to Lombardy and Venice. They spoke this Provençal, really. And also the obvious answer is that the poetry of the time were the Provençal poets that eventually were coming into Italy after 1250. Well, actually, no, 12. When did the Albigensian? Early 1200s, 1208. That a lot of these people were killed. So a lot of the Provençal poets left. They went to Sicily, and the Sicilians said they wrote in Italian and all that. I'm pointing to a Sicilian here. That's why. That's the reason. That's in fact he's considered the greatest of the Italian of all the Provençal poets who was Italian. Yeah. But by the way, I checked just to make sure that if there are any Sordello around today, well, there are. I'll tell you why there are some. But there was a website you can put your last name in Italian, that is, and it'll tell you where they are in Italy. There's little dots, and if there are more dots connected, there are a lot of people. And Sordello are in southwestern Piemonte. Sordello, another thing I could have said, it nothing to do with Dante, but I always associate it. There was a famous baritone. Opera music in general is one of my hobbies. There's a famous. Do you remember him? There was a famous baritone, Enzo Sordello, and I never thought of him. I thought of Dante's Divine Comedy. It was a great. You can still get his recordings. He was a great baritone, Enzo Sordello, and he must have been from Piemonte. I'm not sure where. I don't remember, but I'm assuming that's where when I did it on this website, that's what happened. Yes. Any other comments, questions? Yes.
It always seemed to me when in describing the Valley of the Princes that Dante almost had a tableau in front of him that he was describing. I don't get a sense of movement. Like he describes the big nose, the small nose,
Yes.
the beating of the breast, the resting. There's a stasis about it.
Yes.
Quite
Yes.
unusual
Yeah.
in the comedy. Maybe because it's just before sunset. It's different. It's almost a painting.
Yeah, I almost see that. In fact, I almost see that. Funny you say that. The picture I had in mind. Have you ever seen those things where there's a picture with a lot of people, and then they have like a legend on the side, just the silhouettes of the people with numbers? Well, I feel like there's one of those with all the silhouettes. Only certain ones are filled in. It seems, right? The rest are just painted in, like by painting by the numbers kind of thing. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I had the same feeling. I think. Yeah. That's very interesting. There's not much movement, even though they're singing together. And one of them, yeah, I was going to mention that Dante refers a lot of the people, Sordello does, presumably, obviously, in his mouth, that he talks certain people, nasetto, small nose, nasuto, big nose, another one, membruto, meaning sort of like a big, strong person. He does that physical, yes.
It actually reminds me a lot of the fourth Canto with the limbo, and there's, calling back to the limbo, but also the way it's presented, and also just like a series of people that are presented in this solitary figure at the end. So there's a lot of parallels.
Yes.
But I had the pleasure of presenting the fourth Canto.
Oh, okay, then thank you.
So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out the sequence of people and how that they.
Yes, I did too. Yes.
I was wondering if you thought about that, other than a chronological.
You mean relating it to
the
that?
way that the people are presented.
Oh, here in this particular. Yeah, I mentioned that what struck me was that he was doing it almost in hierarchical fashion, not in a way that were historical, just the way he thought it was from the most important to the least important. That's the impression I got. In fact, it seems easy because he starts with Rudolph I of Habsburg, who was the Holy Roman Emperor, and then at the end there's really William VII of Monferrato, and then sort of Henry the third is sort of like he didn't count because he was a feckless person, but that's how I felt, yeah. And the real big guns are in the middle, Peter the Third and Pedro the Third and Charles of Anjou, and yeah. And then he never forgets to stick in something about Philip the Fair, the Philip the Fourth. Yes.
Is there anything about noses that Dante was fond of?
Yeah, he was king. No, no. Actually, I read at one point that this commentary I read somewhere. That made no sense to me. But they said, how Dante, how Boccaccio mentions, in his little life that he says that he had a nice aquiline nose. I think it's I think for the people, I know for the people he was writing to, in Italy, I'm familiar. Even today, we say how people know that guy with that so and so. And I grew up in an area in Italy, for example, where all over Italy, they describe people. They have nicknames based on how they look. And a lot of times, the nose. In fact, Ovid was called, his name is Publio Nasone, big nose apparently he had. There's a lot of jokes about that in my town about Ovid. They make Ovid jokes in my town. Can you imagine that? So, I didn't dwell on that. I was going to mention that, but yes, he does that. I don't know. Just it's a way of recognizing these people, I guess. I think people were known probably. And it was because sometimes he mentions them by name, but also he mentions them in a different context who they were. And in fact, at one point he repeats the same when he says a maschio naso, a masculine nose, he says, also. Yes.
Is it possible that Dante, knowing the Italians as they are, that would be the reason why he praises the foreigners?
Oh, well.
Symbolizes
Well, that's clearly the case, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, he never says maybe one of those Italians from up north or one of the whoever they are. It's always Arrigo VII, Henry VII, and it's always because it's the Holy Roman Empire, because he believed in that, the monarchy. He believed in the church. He was not anti-Catholic. He was anti certain religious people, but he was very Catholic. He was very Christian, and he also believed in the Holy Roman Empire. I guess and nobody was going to come from Italy for that, because even the one that really was the famous Stupor Mundi, Frederick II, although he was in Palermo, but he was really a Hohenstaufen from Swabia, and he had just as much to do with Italian politics, he had with German politics, with Italian literature, and also German literature, by the way. He was promoting the getting away from the topic, I think here, the troubadours in Sicily in his court, as well as the Minnesänger in Germany. Yeah. Thought I'd throw that in, but the heck, why not? Yes.
In speaking to a person in reference at the library, I was asking her about this particular canto, and she said to me that because of Dante, the Italian language became so popular that it was spoken throughout Europe. Is that a fact?
Well, I read places where they say that. Actually, I was reading this in something else in a different context, saying that there was a time when, in this country, this is almost like the Dante Club thing there, but the people that were, around the time of Longfellow and so on, that anyone who had to be educated must have learned Italian, must have had to learn Italian. Now, at that point, I don't know. I think Latin was still the literary language up until the 1600s. I mean, Galileo got in trouble not because of what he wrote, because he wrote it in Italian. More people understood it. Up until then, people always wrote in Latin. Latin was the language. In England, they wrote in English. I mean, they didn't think English was going to be any kind of a language. It was horrible. Latin was the language.
Francesco,
Leave
there's
me.
a passage from let's say, autobiography, where it says that Jefferson spoke, he learned Italian.
Yes.
Very much so. And he was amazed when he met Mazzei, and he spoke Italian so fluent for the first time. This was Mazzei.
Jefferson, yes.
On the beautiful Italian that Jefferson spoke to him when he first met him, when he got on the boat.
Yes, he did. He also received. So you mentioned something. It reminds me of something else. I remember I've gone to the Monticello other times, and more recently, last 2 summers ago, I think. I'm pointing at my wife here. They took more things out, but I saw, actually, I remember, I didn't dream it up. He received an honorary degree in agriculture from the University of Florence. So, because he was interested in that as well. Yes.
If I may add to this, the first declaration of causes of the Continental Congress was written in 2 languages, in English and in Italian.
Yes.
Mazzei and the rest. And that declaration of causes is at Monticello, actually, the Library of Congress, but it hasn't been published until I published it.
Yes.
So it is significant to know that the first declaration, which is of one of great importance, was
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, to go back to the initial question again, of course, because of Dante, the first great literary output and a Vulgate, if you will, influence, of course, Chaucer and everybody else, and then Petrarca as well. So Italian, I'm not sure. I mean, it was among the literary people that knew Latin, also learned Italian, probably. I don't know. Just a pure guess. Somebody might add something to that. Yes?
Probably if it was not for Dante, Italians would be speaking Sicilian.
Okay, there we go.
Because that was the school of poets.
Yes, yes.
More
Yes.
prominent
Yes.
for Dolce Stimolo.
Yes, of course. Yeah, it was the poems that were the Sicilian words, except for let's see. There's one. There's one I think is closer to the to the Sicilian.
Second.
Yes. Yeah, most of what we see now, they're not written in Sicilian anymore. It's a cleaned up language, although some words still appear. I always remember this from way back when, that up until Manzoni he uses I think a Sicilian word, not an ending "u." I forget what it was, because it still remained so they thought it was an archaic word, but it's really from the old Sicilian school. But however, what they rewrote later was rewritten, and so it's not an actual Sicilian. A lot of stuff went lost. I think they found one. I think there's one Cecco and Giulieri. There's one I think it's closer to the. No, not Fiano Taro. No, there's another person. I can't think of the name right now. Who? Cielo d'Alcamo. Cielo d'Alcamo. Sì, Cielo d'Alcamo. Esatto. Sì, mi fa ricordare. Ecco qua. Grazie. Yeah.
Please don't accept what you said about Sicilian language.
No, we've had this discussion before, so we won't go.
Remember that the Sicilians wrote in Italian.
Yes, that's right. They wrote in Italian, right? Italian are polemicists, in case you didn't know that. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
When was this? Just after the Spanish Inquisition? Did Dante write this after the Inquisition in Spain?
Well, no, the Inquisition that people know about is the one where, with the Torquemada and the, 1500s and so on. But the Inquisition was going on already, even then, at the Dante. It's not the Inquisition you're thinking of, but there was Inquisition going on at the time, too. Yeah.
So it's at the same time period?
No. It's presumably it's been established that Dante wrote this in 1300, but actually wrote it from 1300 to about 17 until he died, or something like that. They're about 21. He died in 1321, but I guess he wrote almost at the very end. Yeah.
So that's after.
Yeah, that came after, much after. Yeah. Okay.
It's interesting how Dante, who is a partisan, takes sides, but at a certain moment he himself sort of goes above all the differences. O gloria dei latini, per cui mostrò ciò che poteva la lingua nostra. And here he puts together Latin, Italian,
Yes, well,
and Provençal, because
well, that's another one of those things that people have polemicized about. What did he mean? Did he mean just Latin? Did he mean all the Romance languages? So I don't know. Maybe he meant more than Latin. It's not. He didn't say Latin in the sense of the language. He says the Latin. So maybe he meant all the languages. All of the. Is the best example. The salient point in all the Latin literatures. Yes.
But it's also very ironic because Sardello was not the glory of the Italians. He refused to show what Italian could do.
Yes, that's true.
It's a real job at the Virgil Sardello, who Dante despised.
He did, that's right. He did. Here he uses them, but yeah. That's a good point. Yes. Yeah. True. By the way, Professor Di Bartolo has the Dante Divine Comedy that he used in high school in Italy, and he's guarding it very well there. And I should mention, I have this is, by the way, the translation, if you like that one. I'm not selling it by all means. This Merwin, he just did the Purgatorio. I guess there's a story he carried this thing in his pocket all the time, and one of the cantos, the 26, I think, and eventually he translated the whole thing. But after doing that, he wasn't going to do any more. Just like Pinsky, he just did the Inferno. He said, "That's it." So, and I can see, but I have one that I have the Vandelli. It's about this thick. But I have one here that I brought just for old time's sake by Natalino Sapegno. I forgot to mention that Vittorio, the fellow I mentioned at the beginning, who does the Dante Lectura Dantis, Lover. He was a student of Natalino Sapegno. And actually, my wife bought this here in Boston College. It says Boston College Bookstore. You know how much? They were really giving away Dante for cheap, 50 cents. And with that, if you don't have any more questions, okay, thank you.